President Trump prepares to give his first address to a joint session of Congress. Many are hoping the highly anticipated speech will provide more detail on his policy agenda. 6 Tunisian security guards have been charged with failing to help tourists during 2015's attack in Sousse. It comes after a UK inquiry slammed their response as shambolic and cowardly. A first concrete step in the peace process, Colombia's FARC rebels will start handing in their weapons this Wednesday after half a century of conflict. Welcome back to the France 24 newsroom with me, Julia Kim. First, President Trump will deliver his first major speech since his inauguration at 3 a.m. Paris time. His address to a joint session of Congress is expected to outline his agenda and check off all the campaign promises he's kept. Lawmakers will also be scrutinizing Trump's speech for more details on his policies, notably on the repeal and replacement of Obamacare. France 24's Philip Crowther is at the Capitol. He has more on what to expect.
Only the White House knows exactly what the content of this speech will be. Indeed, the White House says that it is still being written at this point by President Trump and his speech-writing aides. Now, of course, with this, only the White House knowing what will be in the speech, they have given it a rather bombastic theme. They say this will be about the renewal of the American spirit. Indeed, this administration, or rather the White House and President Trump's aides, believe that a wave of optimism has reached the country. They also say that this will be about promises made on the campaign trail by President Trump and promises kept thereafter. He has been in office for 5 weeks now, has signed plenty of executive orders, one of them, of course, having been stopped by the courts in the end, that being the immigration and travel ban executive order. But this is a president, certainly personally, who believes that he has achieved more in his first 5 weeks than maybe any other US president before him. That, of course, can be fact-checked and is not entirely true. The White House says this will be an optimistic speech, but it will be written by the same people who wrote his inaugural address. The White House at the time also said, or rather the transition team at the time said, it would have a unifying message. Well, that didn't end up being the case. It was a rather pessimistic and gloomy vision of America that we saw on Inauguration Day from President Trump. We'll have to wait and see whether that is again the case here for his first speech in front of a joint session of Congress.
Trump's first 40 days in office has seen a flurry of executive orders being signed, many linked to the implementation of his campaign promises. Sanam Chantier takes us through the details of the new policies and the undoing of old ones.
From the get-go, Donald Trump had an agenda and wasn't slow to begin issuing executive orders once he moved into the White House. The US president tackled his predecessor's Affordable Care Act on day one, leaving concerns with both Democrats and Republicans, with no sign as to what would replace it. A regulatory freeze followed from Trump's chief of staff, carrying the same weight as though from the commander-in-chief himself. On January 23rd, Trump declared he's not just pulling out of 2015's Trans-Pacific Partnership, but looking to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Accord as well. January 24th saw the resurrection of both the controversial Keystone XL and Dakota Access oil pipelines and a mandate to use American steel in their construction. Both projects have seen months of opposition from protesters. Elsewhere, Trump instituted a federal hiring freeze, sought to establish ways to fast-track infrastructure projects and reduce regulation on manufacture. Along with reinstating the Ronald Reagan-era Mexico City policy, it bans U.S. funding going to any family planning group, either domestic or foreign, that supports the use of abortion. It came just 2 days after hundreds of thousands marched globally in support of women's reproductive rights. 25th of January saw Trump's infamous war promise get off the ground. He directed the government to allocate funding to secure the 3,200-kilometer southern border with Mexico. On January 27th, Trump would sign his most controversial order yet, a 120-day ban on refugees entering U.S. territory, a total ban on those from Syria, and a 90-day ban on anyone holding a passport from one of 7 Muslim-majority nations, including those legally resident in the U.S. It led to chaos at airports, travelers in limbo, protests worldwide, and the firing of the acting Attorney General who questioned the move's lawfulness. A U.S. federal appeals court has since put Trump's travel ban case on hold until he issues a new order. On January 28th, Trump reorganized his National Security Council, adding political aide Stephen Bannon. the former head of a far-right website. On February 3rd, Trump signed the 8th executive action, which he said would dramatically scale back the Dodd-Frank Act, one that he said impeded growth by making it harder for banks to lend to consumers and small businesses.
A funeral service was held in the Indian city of Hyderabad for the Indian engineer who was shot dead in Kansas last week. The main suspect made his first court appearance on Monday. Authorities are treating it as a hate crime. Laurent Berstecker has more.
A city in mourning. Srinivas Kuchibhotla's body reached his hometown of Hyderabad on Monday, 5 days after the 32-year-old engineer was killed in a Kansas bar. Friends and relatives grieved silently as they watched the flower-laden body burn in a wooden pyre, a traditional last rite in Hindu cultures. Still visibly in shock, the victim's family expressed a deep sense of frustration at the tragedy.
We are also requested government to ensure that this kind of incidents should not happen to any family.
An Indian engineer working in the U.S., Kuchibhotla was spending time with a friend in a Kansas City bar when a gunman opened fire, allegedly yelling, "Get out of my country." Kuchibhotla was killed and his friend, Alok Madasani, heavily injured. Still walking on crutches, the survivor addressed the crowd at a memorial service in Kansas City on Sunday.
That night was a senseless crime, and that took away my best friend. And it's an isolated incident that doesn't reflect the true spirit of Kansas, Midwest, and United States.
Main suspect Adam Purrington made his first court appearance Monday and was charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. The killing has sparked outrage in India and threatened to further destabilize relations with the U.S., where thousands of Indians emigrate each year to work and study.
Hundreds of Israeli settlers barricaded themselves in as Israeli police began demolishing 9 West Bank homes in the settlement of Ofra. The houses were ruled by Israel's Supreme Court to have been built on private Palestinian land. Emerald Maxwell has the story.
Dozens of protesters make their final stand. But as night fell, the bulldozers moved in and began demolishing the 9 homes ruled to have been built illegally by the Israeli Supreme Court. Earlier in the day, police went from house to house to clear the hundreds of protesters who had gathered to support the evicted residents. As tensions heightened, minor clashes broke out.
What are you doing? What are you doing? 40 families don't have a place to sleep.
This area is inside the settlement, inside Ofra, even if it were private Palestinian land, which was never proven, and it is clear that it was not. The area will never be returned to its alleged owners, and it is simply a demolition for the sake of it.
This demolition in Ofra comes just weeks after Israel evicted several hundreds of Israeli settlers from nearby Amona, the largest of scores of West Bank outposts. The Palestinian owners of that land are still waiting to be allowed to return. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Information Ministry has denounced this latest eviction in Ofra as a media stunt, saying that while 9 houses are destroyed, thousands of others are built. Since Donald Trump came to power, pledging a more pro-Israel administration, the Israeli government has given the go-ahead to thousands of new homes in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Earlier this month, the parliament passed a bill legalizing dozens of other settlements that were previously considered illegal.
They put their friends in the Assad regime ahead of our global security. The angry words of the US ambassador to the UN after Russia vetoed a resolution to impose sanctions on Syria. China and Bolivia also opposed the resolution. Kazakhstan, Ethiopia and Egypt abstained. Britain, France and the US sponsored the resolution after investigators found the Assad regime had used chemical weapons. The Russian ambassador hit back at the US, calling their accusations outrageous. Take a listen.
The problem is that the co-sponsors have chosen an odious and erroneous concept which is totally unacceptable. The fact that the resolution wasn't supported by 6 from 15 Security Council members should make the co-sponsors seriously think. The statements we've heard leave no doubt that the draft was put to a vote based on the doctrine of Western states.
в антирежимную доктрину западных столиц.
A judge in Tunisia has charged 6 security guards with failing to help tourists under attack. This happened during the 2015 massacre at a beach resort in Sousse. Earlier, a British inquest into the attack concluded that the Tunisian security forces' response had been at best shambolic and at worst cowardly. Josh Vardy has more.
A verdict of unlawful killing in the 2015 Sousse beach attack in Tunisia, but no finding of neglect from tour operators and the hotel. Victims and survivors left London's Royal Courts of Justice vowing to bring civil proceedings against travel operator TUI. Lawyers for the families say the travel company had failed to take necessary steps in the face of a deteriorating security situation in Tunisia after the Bardo Museum attack in March 2015.
Even more surprisingly, given the events in Bardo and elsewhere in Tunisia, TUI failed to audit the adequacy of security at the Imperial Mahaba Hotel.
The ruling judge did accuse Tunisian police and security forces of being shambolic and at worst cowardly in their response to the shooting at the five-star resort on the 26th of June 2015. The Tunisian student government was able to attack the resort beach and the hotel for over 30 minutes before finally being shot dead by Tunisian police. Among the 38 people killed, 30 were British holidaymakers who had booked through TUI.
On behalf of everyone at TUI UK, I would like to again extend our deepest sympathy. We are so very sorry for the pain and loss those affected have suffered.
In the wake of the inquest, victims' families have also alleged that not enough warning was given to travellers about dangers in Tunisia. The UK Foreign Office at the time did not advise against all travel to the country, despite the Bardo Museum massacre and 2 failed suicide bombings in 2013 at hotels in the Sousse area.
Next, 2 women arrested over the assassination of Kim Jong-nam are to be charged with his murder. The Indonesian and Vietnamese nationals were caught on security cameras smearing a deadly nerve agent on his face. They claim they're innocent and thought it was just a prank. Anka Ula has this.
Facing death by hanging in Malaysia, 2 women will now be formally charged with the murder of Kim Jong-nam. The suspects, an Indonesian woman and a Vietnamese woman, allegedly smeared a toxic chemical called VX nerve agent on Kim's face at an airport in Kuala Lumpur. The chemical is so deadly, it's listed as a weapon of mass destruction by the UN. Kim, the half-brother of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, died in just 20 minutes. The women claim their innocence. Both said they were paid to spread what they thought was baby oil on Kim for a televised prank. But police say the suspects knew exactly what they were doing. US and South Korean officials are calling it an assassination orchestrated by North Korea, as the victim was a known critic of his half-brother's regime. With tensions high between Malaysia and North Korea, Pyongyang sent a diplomat to Kuala Lumpur to smooth ties and demand the body be repatriated.
The question of the release of the DPRK citizen arrested by Malaysian police related to the above incident. The development of the friendly relations between the DPRK and the Malaysian government.
Malaysian authorities are continuing their investigation into the killing. They have 1 North Korean man in custody and have identified 7 other North Koreans in relation to the affair.
Colombian FARC rebels are due to start officially laying down arms on Wednesday after an announcement from their leader. FARC fighters have been gathering for weeks at UN-supervised disarmament points, part of the terms of a controversial peace deal signed last year. Josh Vardy has this report.
Crossing the country to lay down their arms, Marxist FARC rebels in Colombia have announced that they are to officially start disarming, with the process expected to end by June. FARC members have been gathering at designated demobilization zones across the country for the past few weeks. With 7,000 of them already in place, they're now due to take inventory and destroy their weapons under UN supervision.
The beginning of the disarmament process demonstrates our firm commitment to peace, as the weapons held by FARC members who form part of the monitoring and verification system will be passed over to the custody of the United Nations.
The disarmament is the latest step in the peace agreement signed last year between the Colombian government and the rebels. Only rival movement, ELN, are technically now still engaged with the Colombian authorities in South America's longest-running conflict, which started over 52 years ago, killed over 220,000 people and has displaced millions. FARC rebels will be spared jail time under the agreement, one of the most controversial terms in an accord which has been heavily criticized by many. The peace terms were rejected in a referendum soon after the agreement, with many Colombians complaining they were too lenient.
That's it from us. Stay tuned.